the way
But
around.
my bed now is saved.
Yeah, if you can
Thanks
give me
to
a
Robert
slate
Munger.
just right in front of
Awesome.
Robert's face. Good, Teddy.
And slate.
Awesome. Gentlemen, it's all yours.
Okay, well, you want to talk about how I learned to play the drums and how I got into it?
And you
About-
want to be looking at Robert.
I was
Yeah,
about
so
s-
first of all, tell your own story about learning how to play drums, and then also how and when you met Stevie.
Probably sometime in high school, I really got hooked up to the drums. I rode dirt bikes, motocross, had a CZ that I actually bought from Stevie's brother-in-law, Steve Cottrell. Didn't know Stevie at the time, but Steve Cottrell rode and hung out with some of the other guys in the neighborhood. So I raced that for a couple of years, but I always loved music, rock and roll, and wanted to play the drums and got the chance. I bought my first kit from a high school mate, Nick Morales, for my paper route, paid $90 for the Pearl kit, and started to learn to play. Went in my bedroom, put on the headphones, and listened to my favorite bands, Grand Funk, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple. Learned those songs that way, self-taught. My dad hated it. Every time I practiced, he had to leave. You know, whenever my dad left, I was on the kit playing, and that's what it was. That was, you know, it's hard to listen to somebody practice the drums. I got pretty good, and a good friend brought a guitar player over to my studio, a garage where I lived, Bobby Blesser, and we played 3 times that day, and we just connected, and we formed the band Seraphim. My brother John originally played bass in the band, and another schoolmate, Mark Windham, played drums. Another schoolmate, Matt Lang, was a vocalist, and then we were introduced to Brett Canfield. And Brett brought the name into the band Seraphim, and we started playing and started doing the party scene. And the scene in the late 70s was awesome for parties, backyard parties. I mean,
Scene where?
sorry?
The scene in the late 70s. What?
North San Diego County, San Diego in general, but I lived in North San Diego County, so it was really the original social network. You're at high school, Wednesday, Thursday, people start talking about, where's this party? Where are the parties this weekend? You know, and it just spread. Somebody has a band and a keg of beer, hundreds of people show up. Every weekend it seemed that way, and I wanted to be a part of it, and we started doing it with our band. Didn't really play clubs, did high schools, played my own high school, Carlsbad High, and did a lot of parties, a lot of backyard parties. Didn't make much money, but it wasn't about the money, it was about playing.
Okay, so during the late 70s, of course, it was a good time for music. Not only was there's Seraphim, which is very, very good, and a band that a lot of others looked up to, but there's also Neptune and a couple of others. So since Seraphim was pretty much the name around town, when did you become aware of This Kids, and when was the first time you saw them play?
There was early incarnations of This Kids. I was actually asking Don Ayala the name of his original band, which was Greg Hammond, Keith Shipper, and Lance Stone. And we played a party with them in Encinitas. Friends of ours lived out in a tomato field, more or less, and they had these huge Woodstock type parties, hundreds of people. And I saw those guys play there the first time. And I was friends with Greg Hammond. He was a drummer coming up at the same time. We had the same tastes in music, and we were both honing our craft at that time. And Seraphim was playing at that time. And then I don't even know what their name was. I don't even know if it was This Kids at that time or not. But the first time I actually was aware of This Kids with Stevie Salas was when we made the transition. The late 70s was, rock music was still dominant, but the new wave punk stuff was coming in. 78, Sex Pistols, Ramones, stuff like that. But for me, I was still a total rocker, and it didn't quite hit yet. But that was definitely coming into the music scene. There was that generation of kids. It was a new generation. Every generation has their own music. And it took me a while to catch on. And I think at the time This Kids was playing rock music, Seraphim was playing rock music, but we both transitioned into playing that type of music. The original Seraphim broke up, and the bass player Paul Mucamilla, Bobby Blesser, and I formed a band called The Neat, with a singer, Neil Bergen, who was originally in Seraphim and left because he wanted to do that type of music. But we weren't interested at the time, and we forged on with rock music, but we started seeing it. You wanted to play high schools, you better be playing the Jam and the Police and music like that. And we adopted that as the Neat had to have a the name. Every band was the. This kid's was unique in that. And we started to see each other more and more, playing clubs. The Distillery East was the old ice house in Escondido. We played a club, and that was an all ages in Escondido. There was also a Distillery West in Solana Beach that was 21 and up, and we played that a lot. Again, a lot of parties, after proms, high schools. We'd actually go to high schools and play at lunchtime to get as an addition for free, and then we'd get the gig to play the dance sometime in the future.
In the late 70s at Oceanside, there was at least one time where Seraphim classic lineup and this kid's classic lineup with Paul and Pat and Greg and
Yeah,
Steve
you know,
played together.
you're right, Bob. Before the transition into the new wave punk stuff, we did do a big gig. It was a surf rock type show with rock music and surf videos at the Oceanside Community Center. And I got a pretty good story. Stevie probably doesn't think it's too good, but I was really into staging. I was pretty creative, so I'm building light shows, drum risers, and the Oceanside Community Center was a pretty big place, so I ramped it up, no pun intended. I even built a couple ramps that were lighted, and we were the headliner at the time, and this kid's was going to open. And when I finished setting up our setup on the stage, I think there was about this much room left for these guys, and they weren't too thrilled, but it was what it was.
I was thrilled because I remember looking at it thinking that shit looked like the sports arena. I like it.
You know,
Stupid to know better than I needed actual stage space.
So-
I was still
so-
in high school.
that was a good time. And we actually did a photo session in front of a local surf shop. The name escapes me right now, but it was in the newspaper. It was a pretty big deal.
Okay, you were
Before we get too far ahead,
Can you
can you
lower that a little bit?
touch a little bit real quick? I want to touch on the bit because I want to talk about it. How you guys would sit around, because music was like super important, because my brother-in-law Steve has returned me on to so much good rock and roll, UFO and all these things.
Yeah.
Because you and Steve and all you guys, I remember being in your house, it might have been in your garage or like in a room where you guys would smoke weed and listen to this music. And you didn't even know, because I was like, I was in 6th grade. You didn't even know I'm sitting in the room to this day. I just tell you, like, I don't even remember him being there.
Right.
I should talk a bit about that, but because I want to talk then later how I was absorbing this music from you guys, motocross racing and this rock and roll. I never had Kiss before. I never had UFO. I never had Rush. I never had any of this shit. And so I was a little kid sitting in this room, and you didn't even know I was even there.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I mentioned Steve Cottrell, Stevie's brother-in-law at the time, and that was the motocross era that I was in, and everybody was riding dirt bikes at the time, Steve Cottrell included. And like I said, I bought my first bike from him. And apparently, according to Stevie, he was just a little punk kid sitting in the room somewhere while we're all sitting around smoking weed, listening to the classics, the Sabbath, Zeppelin. Every generation turns the next generation onto their music. I learned about it from my brother. My older brother, John, turned me on. I was 10 years old, and he was turning me on to Grand Funk, Black Sabbath. I'll never forget him coming into the living room in our parents' house and putting on the first Black Sabbath album, Crank It Up to 10. I'm sure he blew the speakers out in that originally. But I guess Stevie was in my life before I knew it. Like I said, I only became aware of him when we were playing music. Never in a band together, but our bands did gig together.
Yeah, and the other thing about you through the years, and it goes to what you do now, is you've always been very studious towards the personalities of musicians themselves. And you've always been very good at seeing who's hot, who's not, and kind of ascertaining where they might go in their careers. 1980, 81, 82. What did you see about Stevie that kind of spoke to you? Man, maybe this guy's going to go somewhere. Because I was talking to Scott Threlfall, who at the time was doing Big Beat Productions, and he told me that he saw it as early as 80, 81, 82. that this guy had potential to go places? What did you see?
I'm going to throw this out there. Do you guys want me to lie, or I
tell the
really,
truth.
I really didn't. I didn't.
I wouldn't have seen it.
No, I honestly didn't see anything special in Stevie at the time. We were all playing cover songs at the time, and we were all pretty damn good at it. And we had a couple originals. The Neat. I wasn't aware of what This Kids was doing as far as original. Everything was pretty much covers at the time because that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear originals. They want to hear the songs they're familiar with. So I left playing music, fell madly in love with my girlfriend, Robin, who I'm married to this day. And we had a family welding business, and I just became involved with that. I got out of the music scene. And as far as the music scene at that time, for an amateur in San Diego, it was great. Parties, like I said, clubs, but as far as the next level, no. Nothing was going on in San Diego. Yeah, there was a couple recording studios. Maybe a couple bands eked it out of there. You had to go to LA. You had to go to LA if you were going to do anything in regard of a career in music. And Stevie did. He disappeared. I didn't know anything about him. I never heard about him after that era because I got out of music. I wasn't playing anymore. I was involved with a wife, a family, a business. And somehow, some way, I heard that Stevie was a guitar player for Rod Stewart. And this was way before the internet or any other way to find out anything. And I just kind of fluffed it off. Like, oh, okay, Stevie's a guitar player for Rod Stewart. Good for him. Whether or not I believed it or not, I don't know. And then one night on TV, there was a concert. Rod Stewart was playing. I don't know what show it was. I don't know why it was on TV. And I thought, hey, I heard Stevie's with Rod Stewart now. So I paid attention. Sure enough, holy shit. There's Stevie Salas on the stage playing guitar with Rod Stewart. I couldn't fucking believe it. Blew me away. It was true. How the hell he ever got there, I had no idea. Like I said, he just disappeared. Obviously, I've heard a lot about Stevie since. He's so talented. He's had some great solo records that he's put out. I was telling him how great his record with Bernard Fowler was. He's done a lot of great things in music. As a music director, playing music. He's played with legends, Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart. I mean, I could go on and on. It's amazing what Stevie has done with his career, and yet he did it. He went to LA. It's just one of those stories where you commit to what you want to do, and you go up there naked, basically, with nothing, and you just work hard and you connect. It's the story about people that go up to studios and sweep the floors and do whatever it takes to make it in the music. I didn't have that. I had fun playing music and I was done. And I moved on. But Stevie, he paid his dues and it worked out quite well for him.
One of the things that we
Bob,
wrote.
I'm going to stop you for just a second. This is awesome, by the way, Robert. That was
Thank
great.
you.
A little bit of blotting if we put a little bit more powder.
Oh, I'm sure I'm sweating.
Not too bad. that was a great
That's
story.
not
I saw the
because
smile
you're
on your
nervous,
face.
it's funny.
Stevie, do you know what show that was and why it was on TV, dude?
MTV Awards, or maybe it was
Yeah, it could have been. I have no idea, dude, but
probably MTV Awards.
that is when I saw it.
No, I don't know why that was taped, but I thought it was the MTV Awards.
Probably.
Because I came home that next week and I was still staying at my mom's house.
That's
And I-
great.
And I went
Thank you.
jogging. I should tell these stories to count.
Sure,
on your edge.
Yeah.
sure.
And I went for a jog, and all the people started coming out of the house on Sourbone Drive and Oceanside and clapping for me. Well, I was jogging by their houses.
Wow.
You're going, what?
I'm like, yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Bob, sorry to interrupt. We are good to go.
Okay. One of the things that Stevie and I wrote about in the book when we were the boys is the difference in his stage presence between This Kids and Rod Stewart. Now, obviously the stages are a lot bigger and stuff, but when you saw him on TV, what did you notice when it came to performance quality?
I didn't really notice, again, like I said, when he was in This Kids, that there was anything special going on there, but he was a rock star. When I saw him on TV, his dress, his hair, he fit right in. He looked like he was feeling very natural, playing well. I mean, he didn't get on camera a lot. It's Rod Stewart, that's where the camera's going to be. But yeah, he was there, and I was just so impressed.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the fact that talk a bit about more. I like to say. I think it's awesome for you to say like, I didn't see shit because you know a lot of people didn't. I remember I came home and John Stewart said to me, "Dude, I mean you were pretty good
Yeah.
when you left here in 1981, but what the fuck happened?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. And because he said the same thing. It's like what. That was definitely. I wasn't like Luke Albano or Steve Burt or one of those guys that were like these virtuosos.
Sure.
And it's good that you say that because everyone else will just blow me up now like, oh, he was always great. Because some guys did think that I was like something. I had this drive or whatever. But it's good that you get the counter like I didn't see shit. You know what I mean? It's like I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's true. We were all good players, and we were playing other people's music, and we did a damn good job at doing it. But nobody that I knew was special that I could see.
Well, however, you know, Stevie, when we were writing the book, we didn't put it in the book, but we talked about it, is he really admired the double lead guitar thing that Seraphim had going on with Bobby and Brett. Can you talk about that just a little bit and how, I mean, he wasn't the only one. There were others that admired that.
Yeah, Thin Lizzy basically, as far as a twin guitar, two guitar thing that was going on, I mean, there were a lot of two guitar things that had gone on prior to Thin Lizzy, but those guys, Scott Gorham and Brian Downey, he was the drummer, thank you, Brian Robertson, they just nailed something, what they were doing. It was like a new sound. I mean, everybody overdubbed guitar. There was 2, 3, 4, 5 guitars on a song, but those guys and what they were doing with a twin guitar thing was really something special. I've heard interviews where they said they didn't even realize we were doing anything special at the time. They were just doing their thing. And Seraphim, we had the 2 guitarists. Primarily it was there because when you've got a recording, like I said, you've got multi-tracks, you've got rhythms, you've got leads. One guy can't do that live, so we had 2 guys that worked beautifully together, sharing lead rhythm duties and harmonizing, doing things together. And I guess, I don't want to say we were legendary for it, but you know, I listen back to tapes of us and we were just raw, in your face, loud and proud, rock and roll. I listen to other tapes that I have of other bands and they were good players, they were performing well, but we were bombastic. You know, the guys went and got Marshall stacks. We wanted to be our heroes. We wanted to put on a concert for people, and what we saw in concert, we emulated with our equipment and as best we could. And we were pretty loud and nasty at the time. We got told to turn down a lot.
Well, we were, you know, one of the things about this Kids that was different than the other bands, and I was, you know, because I'm always looking at roots of how somebody had the seeds in them where they could go places, but this Kids was more diverse in the types of music they played than some of the other bands.
Right.
Like they weren't all heavy metal, or they weren't all hard rock.
Right.
They were diverse. And speaking as a musician, how would that seed, you know, manifest if the right people were there to open it up?
Well,
being already playing guitar for that many different types of music.
You should also say that. I mean, that's no lie. It was years before I didn't start playing until I was 15. I was already back at parties watching Seraphim play all the time. That's the first time I ever saw anyone do an Echoplex solo in my life was Brett Canfield.
Right.
First time I ever saw Marshall amps on a stage, real ones, like not in a picture in a Kiss album, was Seraphim. I mean, there was a lot of kids always watching Seraphim. Seraphim was, because they came a few years before we even started This Kids, really.
Right.
The Don Iola This Kids wasn't This Kids, it was something else. They called
right,
it.
and I wanted to know you know what, Stevie,
they had it.
I honestly think, you know what the name of their band was? Whoever you knew in the band. Don's band, Greg's band, because that's what I used to call them. Hey.
You want to hear something crazy though? You probably forget this. Our original bass player, the year I was in 11th grade, we played some backyard parties like a Highland Block party and shit, and our bass player was Paul Mucamella.
Dude, I never knew that. It blew me away when you told me that, because Paul was 16 when he joined Seraphim. I never knew you played with Paul until I read the book.
In a bad way. His brother went to school with him, and his mom used to call me and go,
Oh,
yeah,
he was
I don't know if you
great.
remember that.
Yeah, no, I didn't know it at the time that Paul had jammed with you. I never knew you
He
guys.
was an original This Kids. Me,
Yeah.
Don, Paul, and Greg.
As far as I know, Paul kind of all of a sudden appeared for us. Well, all that swapping that was going on at the studio out in San Marcos.
Exactly. Talk about that. It's because
Yeah.
we all rehearsed. You did too, right?
Oh,
We all
hell
had
yeah.
rehearsal rooms out there.
See, and I wasn't aware of that either at the time, Stevie. I didn't know that you
Don
were
and
out
Greg's room
there.
is where I started out.
Didn't even know that. But there was at least a dozen bands out there. Not all bands. Some guy, I remember, just had his kit set up in one of the rental rooms, just his drum set, and he would put on the headphones and play. That's what he did out
Robert,
there.
can you start that again and tell what you're talking about?
Okay.
Because, yeah, they won't have the context.
Okay, well, finding a place to rehearse was one of the toughest things. Nobody's parents wanted to have the band at their house. The garage didn't always cut it. The house I lived in was Seraphim, where we started. The neighbors hated us. We insulated as best as we could, but again, I said we were a loud, nasty band, 2 guitars, and yeah, they really did hate us there. So there was a place in San Marcos, which was basically a rental storage unit, multi-units, tons of units. And somehow, most storage units don't allow anybody to do anything but store. And somehow this place became a mecca for band rehearsal rooms. There were at least 10 to 12 bands that were rehearsing out there, and I don't know how we heard about it, but we ended up out there ourselves. It's San Marcos in this rental unit. I don't even remember the name of it or anything. And there was a lot of musician swapping going on at the time. I mean, music is supposed to just be fun, and Stevie's mentioned it in his book, it's very competitive. You always want to be better than everybody else. You want to blow everybody off the stage. And that's a good thing to a certain degree. It makes you play better. It ups your game. Friendly competition, whatever you want to call it. And I do remember we got one of our singers out at this place because we were in between singers at the time, and we heard this voice. Oh my God, listen to this guy singing. And I think it was some kind of a mariachi band or something. It wasn't really rock and roll, but the guy's voice was phenomenal. So we went over there and talked to the guy. His name was Greg. He was a kind of a tall, redheaded, curly, redheaded dude. Didn't look like a rock and roll guy at all. And we stole the guy from him. He became our singer, and the guy was really good. Journey, Boston, all the shit that's so hard to sing. This guy could nail it. The first singer we had, Matt, had average range, but he was a great front man. He was born to be on the stage. But we lost him because he had to commit to his family business, and he made the right choice, family first. So yeah, you were stealing musicians out there from bands at times. If it was available, you'd do it. You wanted your band to be the best, and that place was wild. It was a crazy place to learn and meet other bands and learn your songs.
Okay.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Okay, Mike.
Remember to remind me to.
Yeah, I'm making notes. Yeah, that and also seeing Marshall Amps for the first time.
My final question for you is, looking back, not looking back, but just today, what are your impressions of what Stevie has done with his career since getting up to LA and just knowing him for all these years, but also knowing the young guy who used to, soak up and absorb you and Steve Cottrell and stuff, listening to his music, and then everything he's already said. What are your impressions?
And Robert, hold that thought. We're going to watch it and powder you real quick. So it's not you. This place is hot.
Welcome to my world, Robert.
Oh yeah.
I do this 15 times a day in Japan.
Hey, I think back, I don't know if you want this on tape or not, but we used to play house parties, and some of my favorite parties were being stuffed in somebody's living room,
Say whatever you want because we can always cut it out.
Yeah,
If we don't.
I'd rather.
packed with people.
Wait, save it. Let's get it on tape.
All right.
Okay, and you're up next.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'd like to do bits about him, and then when someone else talks, then have me do it quickly so I can remember what they're talking about, so I can tie it in.
We'll start with.
Yeah, we'll start with him.
And then, okay.
Okay, we're good. Sorry to interrupt, guys. but I
It's
wanted
okay. So shall I tell the house party
I'll
story?
tell the house party and then answer my question.
Okay, so some of my favorite gigs were the house parties. Some of them were in the backyard, some of them were in the house. And these are modest homes. The parents were away. You've heard the story. Parents go on vacation, party time. A couple kegs of beer, hire a band. And we would set up in a living room or a den or somewhere. We'd barely fit in there. And again, I talk in loud, bombastic, Marshalls, drums, bass, PA. The place would be packed to the ceiling with people, everybody sweating, and those were some of the best gigs. You just get into a groove in there. There's just a feeling, there's just a vibe. it just was so awesome. My memory of some of those parties and just how good it seemed at the time. Maybe it wasn't as good as I thought, but at the time it was just amazing to be a part of that scene back then. Regarding what Stevie's done with his career, underrated comes to mind. You know, you have this list of legendary guitar players. Stevie's near the top of my underrated list. And I learned a lot about him in the book he wrote regarding everything he's done outside of actually playing music, musical director, producing. It's phenomenal what he's done. And like I said earlier, committing to what he wanted to do and going to LA and doing whatever it took to make it. I was so impressed with what Stevie's accomplished and is still accomplishing. He's not done. I'm looking to hear more music from him. His book was awesome.
Thank you. And Ken, that is book trailer right there.
Yeah.
That was killer.
There you
Those
go.
15 seconds.
That was great.
Yeah.
Robert, awesome job,
Good
man.
job.
Is there anything you want to add that we didn't touch on?
No, I could talk all day. I mean, you guys barely touched on anything.
And then, just so you know, Robert.
And I won't jump up and run out of here because I'm plugged in.
Thanks, Rob.
Robert's gonna be
Robert,
up.
great job.
Thank you, Ken.
Wow, that was awesome.
I'm so passionate